Hello everybody and welcome to Inland Urbanist. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Riverside County Transportation Commission's Traffic Relief Plan. This is a blueprint that they plan to use as the basis for a ballot measure that will be on the November ballot this year, 2024. This plan is the projects that they are prioritizing and putting forth as an example of what they intend to build upon receipt of the funds if the ballot measure is to pass. Without further ado, let's dive on in. First, to get to the plan, we go to trafficreliefplan.org. That will take us to the RCTC blast page. There, we can scroll down to the link that says read the plan. Clicking on it, it opens the plan. Once the plan opens, we can take a look through it. At first, of course, it has the cover, and we see this one is dated April 2024. This will become important later, so make sure you stick around to figure out why that is. Scrolling down, we get to the table of contents, and they tell us the lay of the land, the overview of the traffic relief plan, the funding plan and accountability to taxpayers, equity among regions and residents, traffic relief plan, your guide to projects and services. Then they break it out by each section of Riverside County. So there's Palo Verde Valley, also the Blythe region, the Coachella Valley, and the Western Riverside County portion of Riverside County. So again, here are all those first pages, and this overview page has broad strokes. So they want to improve freeway traffic flow, improve traffic flow on major roads, improve condition of roads, safety improvements for peds, bikes, and pedestrians, frequency of and access to bus and rail transit, Coachella Valley Rail, connecting Riverside County with new opportunities, provide for more independence and opportunity to those who cannot drive, and using new technologies. We then come down to the page which describes how the money would be accountable to the local region. So basically how the money is going to stay in Riverside County, and that this money would be raised by Riverside County in Riverside County for Riverside County and would not be spent in other parts of the state or country because it would not be available to those other entities, broadly speaking. So then we have the page about accountability and how the project and the fund overall will be transparent and open. And then we have equity among regions and residents. So they want to make sure that, all the money isn't going to say City of Riverside, or all the money isn't going to say Temecula or Corona or something, that it is spread somewhat reasonably throughout the Riverside County, which is again why it is divvied up into the three sections: the Palo Verde Valley, the Coachella Valley, and the Western Riverside County portion. Then moving on, we have a guide to your projects and services. So this describes the types of services and investments that would be made by the plan. They are broken up into several categories. The first one is called Safe Streets and Roads. So this is pothole repair and road maintenance, sidewalk and pedestrian safety infrastructure, protected bicycle lanes, roadway improvements in high accident areas, bus shelters, bridge repairs, improvements to railroad crossings, including grade separations, building traffic calming measures, bypass roads, median barriers, protecting roads, sidewalks and bicycle facilities from flooding and other natural hazards, traffic signals, and improvements to provide accessibility for ADA. Next section is called Highways, and it would be focused on the major state routes and freeways. So improving traffic flow on state routes 60, 90, and 111, and interstates 10, 15, and 215, with new lanes, new interchange improvements, and public transportation, freeway service patrol, and innovative technologies. Public transportation section mentions increasing frequency of and safety of trains and buses, building new track, parking and stations, extending service from Paris to Heaven and San Jacinto, exploring mass transit options on the I-15 corridor, extending rail service to the Coachella Valley and San Gregorio Pass areas, sustaining rail service, then all the different bus service things that are currently ongoing or even being experimented with, like microtransit. Next one is regional connections. So this is basically a step between safe streets and roads and highways. So these are supposed to be bigger roads, and that will provide new access across, and some of them would be more freeway-like and some of them are going to be more street and road-like. So it is all under one heading called regional connection. The next category is called active transportation and is about biking, walking, and equestrian facilities and expanding access to them. The next section is called flood and blow sand control. This is mostly referencing the Coachella Valley, although there are certainly instances in other parts of the county that face those situations as well. And finally, there's the environmental mitigation section. This one is about making sure that the plan overall has essentially funded CEQA mitigation for the constituent projects of the plan to help make it easier to get those projects constructed, as sometimes there are hangups. So scrolling down, the first section we get to, which is about a specific area in the county, is for Palo Verde Valley or Blythe. Scrolling down, and we can see those symbols here. They have safe streets and roads, highways, public transportation, regional connections, active transportation, flood and blow sand control, and environmental mitigation. mitigation as eligible project types in this area. However, if you're familiar with Blythe, I don't believe they're going to be doing much of some of those segments, for example. Like, they're not going to just, for better or worse, they're not going to get rail out to Blythe anytime soon. But they certainly could have flood and blow sand control situations out there. One thing is because Blythe is so small that they may lack funding to get very many major connections type built, given the return to source nature of some of the funds. But moving on, we get to the Coachella Valley, and then this one we get a map. So again, those symbols are sprinkled about on the page. So we see, new connections, active transportation, the rail. Of course, the rail is signifying Coachella Valley Rail, which would be the new service into the Coachella Valley. They have Highway 111, Highway 86, and then Safe Streets and Roads. And you have the Coachella Valley Link, kind of symbolized by the purples strewn about, as well as the line going down into the Mecca area. And so coming down, we see about the funds generated. It would be administered by CVAG, the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, and go to all the different categories as specified above. Kind of talking through them a little. The highways one, the big things that stand out to be on the highways one is managed lanes on I-10. And so that would be interesting to see. Also grade steps on State Route 86. Right now, some parts of it have a couple of grade intersections. So those parts are still expressways. They are continue to build more. So slowly it's getting turned into a full freeway, but this would fund at least one or two more of those intersection rebuilds. Regional connections, they mentioned some things as an I-10 bypass. I believe this is on the north side of the Coachella Valley. And so this would provide an alternate opportunity for people to get through the valley if I-10 is closed. Next section is active transportation. By far the biggest item to note here would be the CV link, as well as the tributary extensions to places like, as mentioned here, North Shore and Desert Hot Springs. If you are familiar with active transportation program, and for several years you might recall that there was a big snafu around it receiving a large grant out of ATP several years back at the state level based on how disadvantaged community benefits were calculated. And so anyway, the CV link is under construction. That's the big active transportation thing I see there. Public transportation, again, the big headline here is CV Rail, Coachella Valley Rail. I will be making another video about Coachella Valley Rail because there's far more than can be covered in this single video at another time. So please make sure you're subscribed so that you're able to catch up on that when it gets published. But suffice it to say that it's good to see that they are putting in some local commitment investment out of this measure, because it would be very needed. Will it be enough? Who knows? The other thing they're looking at is zero emissions buses and stuff, transit priority lanes for buses. It'd be interesting to see where they plan to go those. Of course, Sunline Transit, which operates in the Coachella Valley, was one of the first transit operators to use hydrogen buses. So they are well versed in that arena. Safe Streets and Roads. This is basically everything that's on a road that's not a highway. So the good and bad thing is that it doesn't seem to be extremely prescriptive. So that means agencies could in theory use it to mostly fund good things like traffic calming, protected bike lanes, other safety improvements, better crosswalks and stuff, or they can use it to widen and add lanes and stuff. So we'll have to see. And if you live in any city or community in Riverside County, if the ballot measure passes, make sure to attend those meetings and let your elected officials know in those communities that you don't want to see the funding that could be used for improvements instead get used for detriments. Otherwise, I couldn't say there's a one big project really sticks out to me from this segment. This is your local streets and roads funding. And so if you know a local street or road in Coachella Valley, it would get funded by this at some point. Flood and blow sand control. This is an important one, especially for the passenger rail service. It will become slightly less more important once Coachella Valley Rail is open, as it would add stations in the Coachella Valley, hopefully to the Sunset Limited. But at present, there have been situations in the last few years where the Palm Springs Amtrak station is unusable for months at a time because sand has blown into the station area and the switch mechanism, and it is unusable. And so getting things up to block the sand from blowing as well as flooding situations from developing would be greatly appreciated for all, not just cars, not just bicycles, for example, but even for transit. The next one they have is the environmental mitigation. As I mentioned above, this is basically about helping speed projects along by way of smoothing out CEQA, especially CEQA mitigation requirements that require that habitat be acquired. There are, of course, some advantages to getting habitat, like maybe contiguous or whatever, which makes it strategically useful to have a system like this where all the mitigation is centralized. But on the other hand, it could be argued that it's going to just lead to more of the bad getting built by being already cleared from the CEQA standpoint. Then continue to scroll down. We we have the western Riverside County. So this is everywhere that wasn't in Blythe or Coachella Valley. So basically from west of Cabazon and from the Temecula area to Riverside on the north, and then to the west is Corona. Looking at this map again, the first thing, of course, we note is that, they have Coachella Valley Rail across, they have Paris Valley Line extension mapped out, and they have other things mapped out, such as Highway 79 realignment and the Mid-County Parkway and other similar projects. And so this is what we see on the map. The other thing we see on the map is that we notice the flood and blow sand symbol has been lost. I think that's because obviously it's not because there's none of that in Riverside. It's because it's not as heavy and prevalent as it is at Coachella Valley, I think, is why they took it off this section. Then the other thing we get here is a pie chart. And so Western Riverside County traffic relief investment needs. This is what they plan to spend the money on in the Western County. So when you look here, the biggest recipient is highways. Next biggest is public transit. Next biggest is safe streets and roads. Then environmental mitigation, regional connections, and active transportation. And so when you add it all up, you get 18.5, 3, 8 is 61% to roads. And that's what they are proposing for the measures that would be on the ballot in November would be getting 63% to roads. So again, we see here safe streets and roads is pretty much all the local streets and roads. And it does include on paper that things like protected bike lanes could be funded, bus shelters, grade separations, traffic calming measures, etc. So all those could be funded out of this segment. And then it also mentions regional connections such as Cajalco Road, Grand Avenue, and Buren Boulevard, etc. Moving on, we get to highways. We know that Western County has several highways as opposed to Coachella Valley and Blythe, which essentially only have I-10. That's the only major highway that's a freeway. The Western County, of course, has I-10, I-15, State Route 91, State Route 71, and there are a few other freeways throughout Riverside County. And so we see here they have the I-15 corridor is a hotspot. They want to continue the express lanes basically all the way to San Diego County line. They want to add 9 lanes down to San Diego County line. They want to reconstruct interchanges along I-15. They want to add lanes between State Route 60 and Van Buren Boulevard on I-215. They want to add lanes, auxiliary lanes on that same segment. They want to construct new interchanges in Murrieta, Manatee, etc. They want to reconstruct interchanges. The 91 wants to add a lane in the eastern direction in one spot and the western direction in the other spot, and etc. The 60 corridor, they want to add 1 lane in direction in Moval. And then the I-10, they want to reconstruct interchanges. They want to add an express lane between State Route 60 and Highway 111. And which, if you look at a map, that's actually an orphan segment. And then they also have Freeway Service Patrol funded out of this, it looks like. And then they want to talk in about interconnected highways throughout the county. Then we get, speaking of about the county, we have regional connections. So these are more new roads, new freeways, or that are going to fill in gaps that currently exist. So the ones I have listed are State Route 79 realignment, the Elsinore-Ethernet Expressway, and the I-10 bypass, which would be in Cabazon. Moving on to public transportation again, I will be making a video at another time about Coachella Valley Rail, so we don't have to worry about that right now. And then I will also make one about Metrolink and its various lines. So 2 videos that will be coming out of this section at some point in the future. Nevertheless, talking here through the plan, they do intend to use some of the money to support Metrolink operations and increase service on the lines that go into Riverside as much as they can, given the various constraints of infrastructure and other users. Additionally, they want to invest in more trains and stations. So in addition to Coachella Valley Rail, we'll have to have a whole learning somewhere else. And then they want to study passenger plans along State Route 60, I-215, I-15, etc. However, they study that like every 5 or so years. They have a new study on it out. So it would be good if the study was actually getting it shovel ready from the CEQA standpoint. They also, of course, are going to support the bus services which currently run throughout the county. So that includes RTA, but also Beaumont Pass Transit, Sunline Transit, as mentioned earlier. I believe there's another transit agency. Corona has its own little municipal bus. So that is all going to be funded out of this tax as well, increasing services. And of course, you get an environmental mitigation section. Again, this is the one that's being used to kind of make it easier to build other projects. So half, 6 of one, half dozen of the other type situation. Then we get down to active transportation. Given that Safe Streets and Roads explicitly allows stuff like protected bike lanes, I think it would be much better if active transportation funding that's from this measure would be dedicated solely to larger facilities, which aren't necessarily going to be right next to a road. That includes also making sure that there's good bike park that can be funded from this part of the plan. And undoubtedly, the one thing about these funds is that it would be good to limit them to projects which are not easily duplicated by roads. So we will ensure that happens. Hopefully the RCTC works on ensuring that happens and that this funding is directed more at those opportunities which otherwise wouldn't exist. That brings us to the end of the plan, but there's one thing I wanted to really go through, and that's going back up to that pie chart. When we go up there, we get something interesting. When we go back to the front page, we find a link for the draft of the traffic relief plan, which was released in October 2023 before the board adopted it. And we also find a link to the 2020 traffic relief plan website. Following both of those links, we get the 2024 draft traffic relief plan up, and we also get the approved 2020 traffic relief plan up. When we do that, we see something interesting has happened over time. Clicking on the draft 2024 one, we get a vastly different pie chart. We get highways at 25%, environmental mitigation at 25%, and public transportation at 25%. Then we get regional connectors at 12%, streets and roads at 8%, and active transportation at 3%, commuter assistance at 2%. If you add those all up, you get 47% is directly to cars or car infrastructure versus in the current plan, approved plan, 61%. So the big question, of course, is what happened? And it looks like environmental mitigation has definitely suffered the worst in terms of the funding cut, but it is very evident that the plan did change between the draft stage and the real release. So then let's comparing that back to the 2020 approved plan. That one had 34% to highways, 13% to highway access. So just interchange it essentially. 18% to roads, 16% to trains, 5% to new technology, 6% to buses, 2% to trails, 3% to commuter assistance, and 3% to VMT mitigation. And so this is the pie chart from 2020. And when you add this one all together, we get 52, 13, 5, 7, 68% or so. In 2020, it was going to cars, and then they had dropped it to 47% in the draft for this year's ballot measure. And then the final approved has 61% to cars. So realistically speaking, it hasn't really changed in that time. So with that, Riverside County folks, this is a question which ultimately you have to answer. Is this something that you are willing to vote for? As you can see, it has improved slightly since 2020, but it has not improved since the draft. And even in the improved version, there's still far too much driving. So will this traffic relief plan get Riverside County where it needs to be? That remains to be seen. But for voters in Riverside County, look for information and sightings about it starting toward the election season. And with that, thank you for your time and for taking a moment to wander through this video and through the traffic relief plan. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below, and we will talk to you again later. Have a good one.